The morning sun filtered gently through the blinds of Henry Smith's office, perched at the summit of a gleaming skyscraper in Manhattan. At 35 years old, Henry exuded power and control, yet today his demeanor betrayed something uncharacteristic unease. The city stretched below him, a sprawl of concrete and glass, mirroring the impenetrable coldness he had so carefully cultivated over the years. His stormy gray-blue eyes, typically sharp and calculating, now carried a shadow of worry. Running a hand through his impeccably styled dark hair, a rare tell of his growing tension, Henry stared out at the city. The quiet knock on his door brought his focus back. Roy, his ever-reliable assistant, entered with measured steps, a briefcase in hand. "Mr. Smith, here are the profiles you requested." Henry took the folder, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Roy. Any updates on the investors' meeting?" "Yes, Sir," Roy began, then hesitated slightly. "They've confirmed for next month, but—" Henry's gaze narrowed. "But what?" Roy cleared his throat. "There's some concern regarding your personal life, specifically your bachelor status. It's giving the investors pause." Henry muttered a low curse, his suspicions confirmed. The conservative investors he needed to win overvalued not only financial acumen, but the appearance of family stability. His sharp mind began weaving through possibilities. "Cancel my afternoon schedule," Henry instructed. "I've got a plan." Across town, in a modest apartment in the Bronx, 28-year-old Ava Miller awoke to the blaring screech of her alarm clock. She groaned, her sleep-heavy green eyes focusing on the glowing numbers. 5:30? "Great," she muttered, swinging her legs out of bed. Ava rushed through her morning routine, tying her long brown hair into a quick ponytail before slipping on her cafe uniform. Entering the kitchen, she found her 16-year-old sister Harper, already preparing breakfast. "Morning," sleepyhead Harper teased with a grin. "Cutting it close again, huh?" Ava smiled, grabbing a piece of toast. "No way. I can't risk losing this job." The light banter faded as the sisters exchanged a knowing look. Their family's finances had been a constant strain since their mother's health began to deteriorate. "How's Mom?" Ava asked, taking a quick sip of her coffee. Harper's cheerful expression faltered. "The same. The doctor said she needs a new treatment, but it's expensive." Ava sighed, placing a comforting hand on her sister's shoulder. "Don't worry, Harper. We'll figure it out. We always do." With a quick kiss on Harper's forehead, Ava dashed out the door to catch the subway. During the ride, her thoughts spiraled between worry and determination. She would do whatever it took to ensure her family's stability. The cafe bustled with its usual chaos, customers rushing in and out, orders mixing up, tips coming in sparsely. Despite the whirlwind, Ava kept her smile steady, though inside she felt the weight of her responsibilities pressing down. That was when he walked in. Henry Smith, clad in a tailored suit that screamed wealth, stood out like a beacon against the cafe's modest backdrop. His piercing gaze swept across the room until it landed on Ava. With purposeful strides, he approached the counter, an enigmatic smile playing on his lips. "Ava Miller?" he asked, his voice smooth but commanding. Ava blinked, startled. "That's me. Can I help you?" Henry's smile deepened slightly. "Actually, I think we can help each other." Curiosity and apprehension warred within her as Ava followed him to a quiet corner table. Once seated, Henry leaned forward, laying out a proposal that sounded straight out of a movie. He needed someone to pose as his fiancée for an upcoming event, someone capable of captivating conservative investors with an authentic love story. Ava's brow furrowed in disbelief. "Why me?" Henry's intense gaze held hers. "You have something most people lack: authenticity. It's impossible to fake. Besides, I'm offering compensation enough to clear your mother's medical debts and secure your sister's future." Ava's heart pounded. The offer was absurd, even reckless. Yet, as Henry's words sank in, The phrases medical debts and your sister's future echoed in her mind. And if I refuse, she asked, her voice steady despite the storm within her. Henry's smile turned faintly cool. Then I'll find someone else. But I doubt anyone else needs this opportunity as much as you do, Ava. She closed her eyes briefly, weighing the risks and the rewards. When she opened them, a resolute expression replaced her hesitation. All right, Mr. Smith. I'll do it. Henry extended his hand, sealing the agreement with a firm shake. Good. Preparations will begin immediately. As Ava watched Henry leave the cafe, she felt a storm of emotions swirling within her. A blend of hope and unease took root in her chest, each fighting for dominance. She couldn't help but question what exactly she had agreed to. How had her life veered so suddenly off course? Little did she know, the decision she had made would alter her life forever, pulling her into a world of opulence, mystery, and perhaps a love she never anticipated. The cool evening breeze swept through the bustling streets, carrying with it both promises of new beginnings and the weight of uncertainty. The memory of Henry disappearing into the crowd lingered vividly in her mind, like a prelude to an unwritten chapter. As the city lights glimmered and flickered around her, every step felt like a symbolic departure from her old life and a hesitant approach toward the unknown. When Ava finally arrived at the grand facade of the Plaza Hotel, she paused. The grandeur of the building, bathed in golden light, was almost surreal. A wave of disbelief washed over her. Could she, a simple girl from the Bronx, truly belong in this glittering world? The Plaza Hotel's ballroom was a masterpiece of elegance. Hundreds of candles cast a warm, golden glow, their light refracting through crystal chandeliers and champagne glasses. The city's elite moved gracefully through the space, their designer suits and extravagant gowns a testament to their wealth. Amidst the sea of sophistication, Ava felt completely out of place, like Alice stumbling into Wonderland. The contrast between her modest existence and the lavish surroundings was a stark reminder of how drastically her life was changing. The pearl necklace she wore, a loan from Henry for the evening, felt impossibly heavy against her skin. The navy blue gown, though perfectly tailored, seemed to weigh her down with its sheer opulence. Taking a deep breath, she tried to steady her nerves. Relax, Henry's voice murmured softly behind her. His hand rested lightly on her back, a touch that was both grounding and oddly comforting. You're doing great. Startled, Ava turned to meet his gaze, and for a fleeting moment she caught an unexpected warmth in his usually stoic eyes. It was almost enough to make her forget the pretense of their arrangement. I feel like a fraud, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The weight of guilt pressed heavily on her. Henry leaned in, the subtle aroma of his cologne enveloping her. You're the most genuine person in this entire room, Ava. Trust me, that's your strength. Use it. Before she could respond, a middle-aged couple approached them. The man, gray-haired with a kind smile, extended his hand toward Henry. Henry, what a pleasure to see you tonight, he said warmly, before turning his attention to Ava. And who might this lovely young lady be? Henry's smile deepened as he slid his arm protectively around Ava's waist, a gesture that startled her. Lucas, Isabella, allow me to introduce my fiancée, Ava Miller. Ava, this is Lucas and Isabella Brown, two of our most valued investors. Ava felt her heart pound. This was at the moment her role in Henry's plan would be tested. Summoning every ounce of courage, she extended her hand with a confident smile. It's a pleasure to meet you, she said, her voice steady. Isabella's critical gaze swept over Ava. Miller? I don't recall any Miller families in our circle. Panic flickered in Ava's mind, but she quickly remembered Henry's advice: be authentic. Oh no, Ava replied with a soft laugh. I'm not from that circle. I grew up in the Bronx. My father was a mechanic, and my mother worked as a nurse. Isabella's eyebrows lifted in surprise, while Lucas looked momentarily puzzled. Ava caught Henry stiffened beside her but pushed forward. Henry and I met at the cafe where I worked, she continued, her voice light. He ordered a double espresso and ended up stealing my heart. She glanced at Henry, offering a smile that, much to her surprise, carried genuine affection. Isabella's critical expression softened. What a charming story. And how are you finding all of this? She gestured elegantly toward the grand salon. Ava laughed, this time with real amusement. Honestly, it's overwhelming. Yesterday I was worried about paying rent. Today I'm wearing jewelry that's probably worth more than my apartment. Lucas let out a hearty laugh. What a breath of fresh air. Henry, you've certainly found a gem. Henry, who had been quietly observing, nodded. Yes, he said, his voice tinged with sincerity. I really have. As the evening unfolded, Ava found herself at the center of attention. Her candid nature and heartfelt stories captivated the room. She spoke of her childhood in the Bronx, the struggles of caring for her sick mother, and the efforts to support her younger sister Harper. Her words didn't invite pity, instead, they inspired admiration. How did you keep your family together during such tough times? An older woman asked, her eyes alight with curiosity. Ava smiled, her expression radiant. With love, determination, and a lot of sleepless nights. Hard times have a way of showing us what we're truly made of. From across the room, Henry observed Ava with growing awe. What had begun as a calculated charade was transforming into something far more profound. Ava had a way of bringing warmth and authenticity to every interaction, captivating even the most skeptical guests. Among them was Adam Ross, a formidable investor known for his sharp instincts. Approaching Henry, he spoke in a measured tone. Your fiancée is extraordinary, Smith, he remarked, his keen eyes studying Ava. Where exactly did you find her? Henry's chest tightened, though he maintained a composed facade. As she mentioned, in a cafe. Sometimes the greatest treasures come from the most unexpected places. Adam arched a brow, a faint smirk playing on his lips. Indeed, she appears to have brought some much-needed perspective into your life. As Ava stepped away from the bustling lounge, she sought a moment of quiet amidst the whirlwind of the evening. The secluded balcony she found offered a welcome reprieve, the crisp New York night air brushing against her skin like a gentle reminder of the world beyond the glittering chaos. Henry's voice broke the silence, catching her off guard. You're handling this beautifully, he said, stepping onto the balcony with her. He held out a glass of champagne, his presence both commanding and unexpectedly reassuring. Ava accepted the glass, taking a slow sip before responding. Thank you. I didn't expect any of this to feel this way. And how did you expect it to feel? Henry asked, his curiosity genuine, his tone softer than usual. Ava's gaze dropped to the city sprawling below them, its lights twinkling like stars caught in Manhattan's embrace. I thought I'd have to play a part, to pretend to be someone else. But instead, for the first time in what feels like forever, I feel like myself. Henry studied her intently, the moonlight casting a soft glow over her face. There was something about her, something beyond her appearance that held his focus. You're remarkable, Ava, he said quietly. You've turned tonight into something more than just a performance. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, the weight of their arrangement melted away. In that quiet space, their connection felt real, untainted by the pretense that had brought them together. Ava's heart raced, not with anxiety this time, but with something far more profound and far more dangerous. The moment was interrupted by the faint sound of a throat clearing. They turned to see Adam Ross standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable, though his eyes gleamed with subtle sharpness. I hope I'm not intruding, Adam said, his voice smooth yet laced with calculated intent. Ava, my dear, your guests are eagerly waiting to hear more of your delightful stories. Ava forced a polite smile, though unease stirred within her. There was something about Adam's presence that always set her on edge. Of course, Mr. Ross, she said, her tone measured. We wouldn't want to disappoint them, would we? She glanced back at Henry briefly before stepping past Adam. leaving the balcony and the comfort of Henry's gaze behind. Henry lingered on the balcony, watching her retreat into the crowd. A strange feeling tugged at his chest, a complex blend of pride, admiration, and something far more unfamiliar. He wasn't ready to give it a name just yet. Inside, Ava navigated the remainder of the evening with grace. Her honesty and natural charm drew people in effortlessly, leaving Henry to observe from afar, increasingly aware of how much she had shifted the course of his carefully laid plans. What had begun as a strategic move to appease investors was transforming into something that threatened the boundaries of his tightly guarded heart. By the end of the night, as the final guests bid their goodbyes, their praises for Ava still ringing in his ears, Henry found himself once again beside her. The weight of the evening pressed down on her, evident in the weariness of her posture. She had entered a world far removed from her own, and though she had played her part flawlessly, the cost of it all was etched into her expression. The limousine waiting for them outside offered temporary refuge. As the doors closed, sealing them away from the noise and scrutiny, a heavy silence settled in. "You were incredible tonight," Henry said at last, his voice carrying an uncharacteristic intensity. Ava looked at him, startled by the emotion in his eyes. "Thank you," she replied softly. "But Henry, what happens now?" The question hovered between them, laden with implications neither was prepared to confront. Reaching for her hand, Henry surprised even himself with the intimacy of the gesture. "Now," he began, "we keep going. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find out this partnership is more than we thought it could be." As the limousine glided through the city streets, Ava felt the weight of change bearing down on her. Everything she knew was shifting, and though part of her feared what lay ahead, another part couldn't deny the pull she felt when she looked at Henry. The vulnerability in his eyes spoke of transformation she wasn't sure either of them were ready for. The drive to Henry's apartment blurred past her. Manhattan's endless lights flickered in the reflection of the limousine's windows, mirroring her own doubts and flickers of hope. By the time the car stopped, Ava felt both exhilarated and apprehensive, standing on the edge of a world she didn't yet understand. The morning sun streamed gently through silk curtains, its warmth pulling Ava from a restless sleep. For a brief moment she felt disoriented, the luxury of her surroundings at odds with the simplicity of her usual life. As she sat up, the reality of her situation washed over her. The soft carpet cushioned her steps as she moved toward the window, pulling back the curtains to reveal a sweeping view of the city. Below her, New York surged with life, utterly indifferent to the emotional storms brewing above. A light knock broke her reverie. "Miss Miller," came a voice from the other side of the door. "Mr. Smith asked me to let you know breakfast is served on the terrace." "Thank you," Ava replied, her voice still scratchy from sleep. She dressed carefully, deliberately choosing one of her own simple dresses rather than the extravagant wardrobe Henry had provided. Staring at her reflection, Ava hardly recognized herself. The bright optimism that usually lit her green eyes was dulled by the weight of uncertainty. On the terrace, Henry was already seated, his coffee steaming beside him, as he flipped through the financial pages of the morning newspaper. The sunlight bathed his sharp features, but his expression softened as AVA approached. An automatic smile graced his lips, a rare moment of warmth in his otherwise composed demeanor. "Good morning, Ava. I hope you slept well," he greeted, setting the paper aside briefly. Ava nodded as she took a seat across from him. "Yes, thank you. The room is very comfortable." A tense silence settled over the table, the kind that weighed heavy with unspoken thoughts. Ava reached for the coffee pot and poured herself a cup, her movements deliberate but slightly hesitant. Henry observed her quietly, noting the understated simplicity of her dress and the subtle tension in her shoulders. After a moment, he broke the silence. "Are you all right?" he asked, folding the newspaper and leaning forward slightly. Ava hesitated, stirring her coffee absently. I don't know," she admitted, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "This is all so different from anything I've ever known. I feel like I'm losing myself." Henry frowned, concern flickering in his eyes as a deep line creased his brow. "Ava, this is only temporary. You're doing an incredible job. Once everything is settled, you'll be able to return to your life." Though he meant his words to reassure her, they instead struck a nerve. Return to her old life? The thought twisted something inside Ava. After a taste of this world, its luxury, its endless possibilities, how could she possibly go back to the struggles that had once defined her existence? She stared into her coffee, her voice barely audible. "What if I don't want to go back?" Henry's eyes widened slightly. "What are you saying?" Taking a deep breath, Ava found the courage to give voice to her internal conflict. "Henry, I grew up scraping by, dreaming of something better for my family. Now, I'm living that dream, even if it's all pretend. How can I just let it go and step back into my old reality?" Henry's gaze didn't waver. Leaning closer, his voice took on an intensity that matched the emotions in her words. "Ava, you don't have to turn off who you've become. What you've earned here respect, admiration that's real. It has nothing to do with money or status. It's because of who you are." His words touched her, stirring something deep within. Yet they didn't ease the turmoil she felt. Standing abruptly, Ava moved to the edge of the terrace, the city stretching endlessly before her. "But what about my family? My sister, my mother, they rely on me. How can I balance this new world with the life they need me to live?" Henry followed her but stopped a few paces away, giving her space. "Maybe it's not about choosing one over the other," he said gently. "Maybe it's about finding a way to embrace both." Ava turned to him, surprised by the kindness in his voice and the understanding in his expression. For a fleeting moment, she saw a version of Henry that few likely knew, a man whose vulnerability was carefully hidden beneath layers of control. It was both comforting and unsettling. Their moment was interrupted by the insistent buzz of Ava's phone. She glanced at the screen. Harper. With an apologetic look at Henry, she answered. "Hey Harper, what's going on?" Her sister's voice came through, laced with worry. "Ava, where are you? You didn't come home last night, and the cafe followed wondering why you missed your shift this morning." Ava closed her eyes, guilt washing over her. In the whirlwind of recent events, she had completely forgotten her responsibilities at home. "I'm sorry, Harper. I've been working on something important. I'll explain everything when I get back, okay?" Reassuring her sister as best as she could, Ava ended the call and turned back to Henry. The inner conflict was written all over her face. "I need to go," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "My family, they need me right now." Henry nodded, his expression steady yet laced with understanding. "Of course. But Ava, remember this, you don't have to face anything alone. If there's ever something you or your family need, I'm here." His sincerity caught her off guard. For a moment, she simply stared at him, unsure how to respond. "Thank you, Henry. I'll be back for the next event." As she gathered her things, preparing to leave, Henry watched her with a mix of admiration and concern. The clarity of his emotions surprised him. What had begun as a calculated arrangement now felt like something far more unpredictable and infinitely more dangerous for the careful walls he had built around himself. Back at her modest apartment in the Bronx, Ava was met with an eager embrace from Harper. "Ava, we were so worried," Harper exclaimed, pulling her older sister inside, her eyes searching for reassurance. Ava managed a smile, though guilt tugged at the edges of her expression. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. It's been a hectic week." From her usual spot in the worn armchair, Emma looked up, her face pale but her eyes lighting with joy at the sight of her eldest daughter. "Ava, my darling, I'm so glad you're home." Kneeling beside her mother, Ava gently took Emma's frail hand in hers. "Mom, how are you feeling?" Emma's smile was soft but unwavering. "Better now that you're here. But Ava, you seem different. Is there something going on?" The question hung in the air, and Ava hesitated. The weight of her secret felt heavier in the familiarity of home. How could she explain the double life she was leading without risking the stability they all depended on? After a pause, she opted for a half-truth. "I've started a new job," she said carefully. "It's an amazing opportunity, but it's been demanding." Harper tilted her head, her sharp eyes picking up on the tension in Ava's tone. "What kind of job, and why are you dressed like that?" Only then did Ava glance down, the elegant dress she wore suddenly feeling conspicuously out of place in their humble apartment. "It's for corporate events," she explained, straightening the fabric nervously. "I have to dress the part." Emma's gaze lingered, her intuition as a mother cutting through Ava's guarded words. "Ava, you know you can tell us anything, don't you?" Ava's heart clenched, torn between the desire to confide in her family and the fear of exposing them to the complexities of her arrangement with Henry. "I know, Mom," she replied softly, forcing a smile. "And I promise I'll tell you everything when the time is right." Later that night, as Ava lay on her narrow bed, she stared at the ceiling, her thoughts divided between two conflicting worlds. On one side, the warmth and familiarity of the Bronx, with its struggles but also its unconditional love. On the other, the glittering possibilities of the life Henry had drawn her into, a life she couldn't quite bring herself to trust. Reaching for her phone, Ava read Henry's last message. "I hope you got home safely. Remember, I'm here if you need anything." Her eyes welled up, and a solitary tear slipped down her cheek. How could she possibly choose between the two worlds pulling at her? How could she hold on to her sense of self in a reality so far removed from her own? With those questions echoing in her mind, Ava finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, her dreams a chaotic blend of extravagant ballrooms and the familiar streets of the Bronx. As Ava slept, unaware of how much her life was already changing, the challenges awaiting her were greater than she could imagine. Meanwhile, New York hummed with its ceaseless energy, oblivious to the personal battles unfolding within its walls. High above the city, in his private office, Henry Smith sat alone. Normally a command center for high-stakes deals, the space now felt more like a sanctuary. The evening sky outside was painted in fiery hues of orange and pink, its beauty a stark contrast to the inner turmoil Henry was wrestling with. The untouched glass of whiskey in his hand reflected the tension in his heart. For the first time in years, his thoughts were far from business, they were consumed by Ava Miller. The memory of her smile lingered, as vivid as the lights of the city sprawling below him. He could still see the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about her family, a light so genuine. It felt foreign in his world of calculated precision. A knock on the door pulled him from his reverie. Roy, his loyal assistant, stepped in with a folder in hand. "Mr. Smith, here's the background report you requested on Miss Miller." Henry hesitated before taking the folder. He wanted to know more about her, about the life she had led before stepping into his, but guilt pricked at his conscience. Was it right to pry into her past? "Thank you, Roy," he said, setting the folder aside without opening it. "You can head home for the night." Left alone once more, Henry glanced at the folder but resisted the urge to read it. Instead, he picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Ava's name before he finally pressed call. In her Bronx apartment, Ava was helping Emma into bed when her phone vibrated in her pocket. Seeing Henry's name on the screen sent a wave of conflicting emotions through her: nervousness, excitement, and something else she couldn't quite place. Stepping into the living room, she answered. "Hello?" Henry's voice, softer than usual, came through the line. "Ava, I hope I'm not interrupting." "No, you're not," she replied, sitting down on the worn sofa. "Is everything okay?" There was a brief pause on his end, as though he was weighing his words. "I just wanted to check in, to see how you're doing. After everything, I was worried." Her heart skipped a beat. It was the first time Henry had reached out to her outside the confines of their arrangement. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice carried the weight of her struggles. "Balancing everything is tough, but I'm managing." Henry closed his eyes, imagining her small apartment and the life she had described to him, a world so different from his own. "Ava, I know I've asked a lot of you. If there's anything you need." She cut him off gently. "Henry, why are you really calling?" The question caught him off guard, leaving him momentarily speechless. I don't know," he admitted finally. "I guess I just needed to hear your voice." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken emotions, a connection forming between two people caught in an improbable situation. Neither could fully explain it, but both felt it deeply.